There are approximately 47 million safety regulations in the Galactic Concordance Manual, 3rd edition revised. Most of them involve proper waste disposal procedures, acceptable decibel levels for Starship engines, and a surprisingly lengthy section on why you should never, ever trust a Glipnorp with your credit card information. Buried somewhere between Regulation 23.847-291 on appropriate tentacle placement during diplomatic functions and Regulation 23.847-293 on why quantum foam is not a beverage, there exists Regulation 23.847-292. It's written in red, all caps, with 17 exclamation marks. And it says simply, never, under any circumstances, engage humanity in military conflict during their winter months. The sages of Lumethria, a race so ancient they remember when the universe had that new car smell, added this regulation approximately 400 Earth years ago. The sages don't add regulations lightly. In fact, the last regulation they'd added before this one was, don't poke black holes with sticks, no matter how funny it seems at the time. That was 8,000 years ago. The problem with having 47 million regulations is that nobody reads them. Not really. You skim, you search for keywords. You assume that if something was truly important, someone would have mentioned it in the orientation video. General Crixnath Velmoranth of the Collective Primordial Empire did not read Regulation 23,047-292. To be entirely fair to Crixnath, he didn't read any regulations. He considered them, and I quote, bureaucratic suggestions for species lacking the spine to conquer properly. Crixnath had conquered 47 star systems. He'd subjugated 14 different sentient species. He'd won the Empire's most aggressive expansion strategy award 3 cycles running. He had a trophy room that required its own gravitational field to keep everything from floating away. He was, by all accounts, very good at his job, which is why it came as something of a surprise when, on the 17th of December 2024, he stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Inevitable Consequence, staring at the 3rd planet from an unremarkable yellow star, and said, this one. We invade this one. His second-in-command, Commander Thelix Orn, blinked all 4 of his eyes in sequence. Sir, that's the human homeworld. Correct. The human homeworld? Is there an echo in here, Thelix? Yes, the human homeworld. Terra. Earth, dirtball number 3, whatever they call it. Thelix made a sound like a balloon deflating through a harmonica. Sir, the sages have classified humans as a Category Omega threat. Category Omega means extreme caution required, Thelix, not impossible to defeat. With respect, sir, Category Omega usually means this species once destroyed a battle cruiser using only improvised weapons and what they called, quote-unquote, sheer spite, end quote. Crixnath waved a dismissive appendage. Ancient history. That was clearly an anomaly. Look at them down there, Thelix. Look at their cities, their primitive infrastructure, their hilariously inefficient governments. They can't even agree on a single measurement system. Half of them measure temperature in Fahrenheit, whatever that is. Sir, I really think we invade at dawn, or whatever passes for dawn on this miserable rock. Full force. Standard overwhelming superiority protocol. By this time tomorrow, we'll be sipping their fermented grain beverages and accepting their unconditional surrender. Thelix opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, finally managed. Sir, it's December. So, on Earth. It's December on Earth. What's your point, Commander? Thelix didn't have a point. Not exactly. He had a feeling. A sort of creeping sensation along his dorsal ridge that suggested this was a tremendously bad idea. But he didn't have any concrete evidence, no regulation, no precedent, just a vague memory of hearing something, somewhere, about humans and winter, and how the two mixed about as well as antimatter and regular matter. No point, sir, Thelix said quietly. Excellent. Prepare the invasion force, all battalions. I want this over before whatever festive holiday they're celebrating ends. They've got these ridiculous lights everywhere, very distracting. Beam, what Krixnath did not know, because he had not read Regulation 23,247,292, was that those lights were not military installations. They were not defensive perimeters. They were not even particularly meaningful in a tactical sense. They were Christmas decorations. This distinction would prove to be critical. In a small office on the sage homeworld of Lumethria, approximately 47 light-years from Earth, a junior archivist named Primax had the worst Monday morning of his entire life. Primax had one job. Monitor for regulation violations in the outer spiral arm territories. Usually this meant filing reports about improper parking in asteroid belts or unauthorized mining in protected nebulae. Boring stuff. Safe stuff. The kind of job where the most exciting thing that happens all week is someone puts the wrong colored bin out for trash collection. Then his monitor lit up like a supernova. Regulation 23.847.292. Violation in progress. Primax stared at the screen. Blinked, stared some more. Checked the date, checked the location. Felt his three stomachs simultaneously attempt to exit his body through different orifices. "Oh no," he whispered. "Oh no, 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 no." He ran. Well, Lumethrians don't exactly run. They sort of undulate urgently. Primax undulated very urgently through the halls of the Galactic Concordance headquarters, leaving a trail of dropped datapads and terrified interns in his wake. He burst into the council chamber, where the 7 high sages were discussing something tremendously important about tariff regulations on imported spices. "The Collective is invading Earth," Primax shrieked. "In December." The room went silent. High Sage Law Maven, oldest of the sages, who had personally written Regulation 23.847.292, slowly rose from his seat. His face, if you could call it a face, had gone the color of old oatmeal. "What?" he said very quietly. "Did you just say?" "The Collective Primordial Empire. They're invading Earth, the human homeworld, right now, and it's December 17th. High Sage Ternethia made a sound like a tea kettle achieving consciousness. "Who authorized this? Who is leading this invasion?" "According to our intelligence, General Krixnath Velmoranth, sir." "Krixnath?" Lormaven sat back down heavily. "The one who conquered the Forian Nebula? The one who broke the siege of Crandor 7? That Krixnath?" "Yes, sir." "That idiot!" Lormaven slammed 3 of his appendages on the table simultaneously. "That absolute moron! Does he have any idea what he's done?" "I don't think he read the manual, sir." "Of course he didn't read the manual. Nobody reads the manual. That's why I wrote that regulation in red, in all caps, with 17 exclamation marks. "Should have been 18, muttered Sage Prelenth. "Not helping, Prelenth." High Sage Ternethia leaned forward. "We need to understand the situation. Where exactly is this invasion taking place?" Primax consulted his datapad with shaking appendages. They're planning multiple landing sites, sir. Primary target appears to be somewhere called Minnesota." Every sage in the room inhaled sharply. "Minnesota," Lormaven repeated flatly. "In December." "Yes, sir. Minnesota, the one in North America, the one where it gets cold enough that exposed skin freezes in minutes, that Minnesota." "I believe so, sir." Lormaven put his face in his hands. "All 4 of them. They're dead. They're all dead. The entire invasion force. Dead. Sir, with respect, the Collective Primordial Empire has 300 warships, 50,000 ground troops, and enough firepower to crack a small moon. I don't care if they have the Infinity Gauntlet and a really good attitude," Lormaven exploded. "They're invading humans in winter. Do you have any idea what that means?" The other sages nodded grimly. They knew. Oh, they knew. Sage Quinn Areth, who usually stayed quiet during meetings, spoke up. Should we tell them the stories? About the others who tried?" "Which story?" Lormaven asked bitterly. "The Krathnian conquest fleet? The Mordelian subjugation force? The entire 13th Dynasty armada?" All of them, Primax squeaked. All of them, Lawmaven confirmed. Every single military force that has attempted to engage humanity during their winter months has suffered catastrophic, humiliating, absolute defeat. And we're not talking close calls here. We're talking about invasion forces that limped home with 70% casualties, battle-scarred veterans who wake up screaming about things called snowmobiles and hockey sticks, and one particularly traumatized battalion commander who couldn't see the color white for the rest of his natural life without having a panic attack. But why? Primax asked. What is it about winter that makes humans so murderous? Tirnethia supplied. Violent, irrationally aggressive. I was going to say effective, sir, but yes. Lawmaven stood up and walked to a large view screen on the wall. He pressed a button. An image appeared. A human face, male, middle-aged, wearing what appeared to be insulated clothing and holding a hot beverage. This, Lawmaven said, is a human during winter. Now you might think this is just a regular human, but you would be wrong. This is a human who has survived months of cold, darkness, and seasonal depression. This is a human who has dealt with frozen pipes, icy roads, and the psychological trauma of family holiday gatherings. This is a human who has waited 40 minutes for their car to warm up. This is a human who has scraped frost off their windshield at 6 in the morning in negative 20-degree temperatures. He paused for dramatic effect. This is a human who has nothing left to lose. Julio, the room absorbed this information. Now, Lawmaven continued, take that human, multiply them by several million, add seasonal stress, add holiday shopping, add family obligations, add the fact that it's December, which means they're broke from buying presents, exhausted from social obligations, and have been eating nothing but cookies and ham for 2 weeks. And then, you invade their planet. Oh dear, Primax whispered. Oh dear doesn't begin to cover it. You know what happens. I'll tell you what happens. Those humans don't see an alien invasion force. They see an interruption. They see another problem added to their already overwhelming list of problems. They see someone else demanding their time and energy during the worst month of the year. Sage Prelenth nodded sagely, and humans respond poorly to interruptions. Poorly? Lawmaven's voice could have stripped paint. The Krathnians tried to invade Russia in February. Russia? In February. Do you know what the survivors said when we debriefed them? Silence. They said, and I quote, "The humans were angry that we interrupted their vodka time. They pursued us with tractors, farm equipment. One of them threw a whole frozen fish through our observation window. It went through 3 inches of reinforced plexiglass. The fish was so frozen, it didn't even bend. We lost 17 soldiers to improvised fish-based weaponry." 17! Surely that was an isolated... The Mordelians invaded Canada during a hockey playoff game. A hockey playoff game. The humans didn't even wait for military intervention. Civilians took matters into their own hands, with sticks and anger. The Mordelian commander's final report, before he resigned his commission and became a moisture farmer, stated that humans use something called a Zamboni as a battering ram. We still don't know what a Zamboni is, but apparently it's terrifying when weaponized. Primax had gone very pale. Sir, what do we do? We? Lawmaven laughed, a sound like grinding gears. We don't do anything. We watch. We document. We add this to the historical record as yet another example of why nobody should fight humans in winter. And then, when it's all over, we update Regulation 23,847-292 with even more exclamation marks. Shouldn't we warn them, the collective? We tried, Tirnethia interjected. We've been sending warning messages for the last 40 minutes. They're ignoring our hails. Standard, we're too busy conquering to take calls protocol. Lawmaven returned to his seat, looking suddenly very old and very tired. Then there's nothing more we can do, except watch, and pray to whatever deities are listening that this serves as a lesson. though I doubt it will. It never does. How long do you think they'll last? Quinnereth asked quietly. Loremaven checked the chronometer. The invasion starts in approximately 20 minutes, Earth time. I give them 2 hours, maybe 3 if they're lucky. That's all? That's generous. They're landing in Minnesota in December, during what I believe humans call the week before Christmas. He shuddered. May whatever gods they worship have mercy on their souls, because the humans certainly won't. And on the surface of Earth, in a small town called Frostbite Falls, Minnesota, population 8,742, Bobby Thorskold was having a bad day. First, his truck wouldn't start. Dead battery. Again, in negative 15-degree weather. Second, his mother-in-law was arriving tomorrow for a 2-week holiday visit. Third, the Vikings had lost. Again. Fourth, he'd just discovered that the liquor store was closed because apparently there was some kind of emergency, which meant he'd have to face his mother-in-law's visit sober. And fifth, most pressingly, there was a spaceship in his driveway. Bobby stood in his kitchen, coffee mug in hand, staring out the window at the 30-foot-tall metallic vessel that had landed directly on top of his snowmobile. "Martha!" he called to his wife. "There's a spaceship on my snowmobile." Martha appeared from the living room, looked out the window and sighed. "Well, don't just stand there. Go tell them to move it. Tell them to—" "Martha, it's a spaceship." "I don't care if it's the Queen of England, Bobby. That's your snowmobile. You spent $3,000 on that thing. Go tell them to move." Bobby set down his coffee, pulled on his boots, his jacket, his hat with the ear flaps, his gloves, took a deep breath, and walked outside. The spaceship had a ramp. The ramp was down. Standing at the bottom of the ramp were 3 aliens. They looked vaguely reptilian, covered in what appeared to be high-tech armor, holding weapons that crackled with blue energy. Bobby walked up to them. "You're on my snowmobile," he said. The lead alien turned. Its face was all angles and teeth. Its eyes glowed red. Its armor had symbols that probably meant something very important in its native language. "Human," it said, its voice processed through a translator that made everything sound vaguely menacing. "This world is now under the authority of the collective primordial empire. You will submit to—" "You're on my snowmobile." The alien paused. Did you hear what I just said? We're invading your planet." "That's great. Congratulations. Now get off my snowmobile before I make you get off my snowmobile." One of the other aliens laughed. Actually laughed. "This primitive thinks he can do—" Bobby Thorskold was a large man. 6'4", 250 pounds. He'd worked in logging for 30 years. He'd survived 2 blizzards, 1 tornado. And that time his cousin Eric brought potato salad to the family reunion that gave everyone food poisoning, except Bobby, who had the stomach of a wolverine. He'd also had enough. He grabbed the nearest alien by its chest plate, lifted it approximately 3 feet off the ground, and threw it into a snowbank. "Martha," he bellowed toward the house, "get my shotgun." What happened next would become known in military history as the Frostbite Falls incident, or more colloquially among human historians as that time Bobby Thorskold started a war. The aliens, to their credit, tried to respond appropriately. They raised their energy weapons. They adopted defensive postures. They activated their combat protocols. Bobby threw a frozen pine cone at one of them. It hit with the force of a small meteorite. The alien went down. See, what the collective primordial empire had failed to research, among many other things, was that Minnesota winters produce very specific environmental conditions. Conditions that include frozen projectiles of various compositions, pine cones, ice chunks, snow compressed into near-solid masses. And Minnesotans, faced with these conditions every year, had become very, very good at throwing things. Martha appeared in the doorway with Bobby's hunting rifle. Not the shotgun, the rifle, the big one, the one he used for elk. "You want me to shoot 'em, Bobby?" "Not yet, Martha. Let's see if they're smart enough to leave." The third alien, showing perhaps more wisdom than its companions, tapped something on its wrist device. "Command, this is Scout Unit 47. We have encountered resistance." From orbit, Commander Thelix's voice crackled through. "Resistance already? You've been on the surface for 3 minutes. The human threw Grixnar into a frozen water deposit. He what? And he's not military. He's just standing there in some kind of insulated garment, drinking from a container." Bobby had retrieved his coffee mug from inside. He took a sip, made eye contact with the alien, took another sip. "Sir," the alien continued, its voice rising, "I think we should reconsider the invasion timeline. This human seems upset." "It's one human," Thelix snapped. "You have energy weapons. Use them." "Sir, with respect, there's something very wrong here. This human doesn't seem afraid. He seems annoyed. So shoot him." The alien raised its weapon. Bobby didn't move, just stood there, drinking his coffee, staring. The alien's hand began to shake. I can't, sir." "What? He's not even flinching. He's just looking at me like I'm some kind of inconvenience." Bobby finished his coffee, handed the empty mug to Martha, cracked his knuckles. "Last chance," he said. "Get off my snowmobile." The alien fired. The energy bolt sizzled through the air, crackling with enough power to vaporize a small vehicle. Bobby leaned slightly to the left. The bolt missed by 3 inches. There was a moment of profound silence. Even the wind seemed to pause. Bobby's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did, something that made the alien take an involuntary step backward. "Martha," Bobby said calmly, "call the boys." "Which boys, honey?" "All the boys." Within minutes, Bobby's phone tree had activated. In small towns across Minnesota, phones rang, text messages pinged, the word spread with the speed of gossip at a church potluck. Aliens, landing in December, interrupting Christmas preparations. This would not stand. In his farmhouse 7 miles away, Dale Bergstrom had just finished wrapping presents when he got the call. He looked at his wrapping paper, his tape dispenser, his half-decorated tree. He thought about the aliens interrupting his family's Christmas. He got his deer rifle. In her suburban home in a nearby neighborhood, Janet Olafson had spent 4 hours making lutefisk for tomorrow's family gathering. 4 hours. She'd planned this meal for weeks. She'd ordered the cod specially. She'd prepared the lye solution just right. And now aliens were invading. She got her husband's ice fishing equipment. Some of those augers could drill through 2 feet of lake ice. They'd do just fine on alien armor. Across town, the Johnsons, the Andersons, the Petersons, and both sets of the Hansons all received the call. They looked at their Christmas trees, their holiday decorations, their meticulously planned meals. They'd survived winter this far. They'd made it through November and half of December. They could see the finish line. And now, of all times, someone had decided to invade. Humans are, generally speaking, a patient species. They'll tolerate quite a lot. Traffic jams, annoying co-workers, pineapple on pizza. But there are limits. And interrupting Christmas in Minnesota during one of the coldest winters on record, after months of accumulated seasonal stress, that crossed the line. By the time Commander Thelix realized something had gone catastrophically wrong, it was far too late. His first indication was when Scout Unit 47 stopped responding. His second was when Scout Unit 48 reported civilians approaching with farming equipment and very aggressive body language. His third was when Scout Unit 49's final transmission consisted entirely of screaming and the sound of something very large and very loud bearing down on their position. "All units report status," Thelix ordered. Static, more static. Then finally a transmission from Landing Zone 7. "Sir, they've got snowmobiles, weaponized snowmobiles. The transmission cut off in a symphony of screeching metal and what sounded distinctly like human war cries. General Crixnath burst onto the bridge. "What is happening down there?" I don't know, sir. We're losing contact with ground units. They're reporting civilian resistance, organized civilian resistance. Civilians? We're being defeated by civilians? They're using their recreational vehicles as weapons, sir, and their sporting equipment, and they're throwing things, frozen things. On the main view screen, a live feed from a combat drone showed a scene that would haunt Crixanath for the rest of his life. A group of middle-aged humans, dressed in puffy jackets and boots, had surrounded an alien dropship. They weren't using military tactics. They weren't following any recognized combat doctrine. They were just angry. One human, a woman in her 50s wearing what appeared to be a jacket decorated with small geometric shapes, walked up to an alien soldier and hit it with her purse. The soldier went down. Another human, elderly, possibly in his 70s, was chasing 3 alien scouts with what the computer identified as a snow shovel. He was gaining on them. A third human, gender indeterminate under all those layers, had somehow gotten on top of a hover tank and was beating on it with what looked like a hockey stick while screaming something about the Packers. "Sir," Thelix said weakly, "Sir, I think we should abort." "Abort? We have 300 warships, 50,000 troops. Sir, we've lost 17% of our ground forces in 20 minutes. 20 minutes? To civilians?" "Armed civilians, sir. Very angry armed civilians." On screen, a human male had just flipped over a troop transport using what appeared to be a tractor, an agricultural tractor. He was laughing while he did it. Crixanath felt something he hadn't felt in 47 successful campaigns: fear. "Get me a communication line to their leadership," he ordered. "Now!" "Sir, we've tried. They're not responding to standard diplomatic hails." "Then try non-standard diplomatic hails." "What does that even mean?" "I don't know, Thelix. Improvise." What they didn't understand, what they couldn't understand, was that there was no centralized human resistance. There was no military coordination. There was no chain of command. There was just Bobby Thorskold and a couple hundred of his closest friends, neighbors and relatives, all of whom had reached the same conclusion independently. These aliens had picked the wrong day to invade. Bobby had commandeered his cousin Eric's modified pickup truck, the one with the snowplow attachment and the "I'd rather be ice fishing" bumper sticker. He'd loaded it with ammunition, a cooler full of beer, and a thermos of Martha's coffee. And he was currently pursuing an alien APC down County Road 47. "This is for my snowmobile," he bellowed, ramming the truck into the APC's rear quarter panel. The APC skidded on the ice, tried to correct, failed, went careening into a ditch. Bobby stopped, got out, walked over to where the alien crew was stumbling out of the overturned vehicle. "You guys okay?" he asked. The aliens stared at him in complete bewilderment. "I mean, you're invading my planet and all," Bobby continued, "but I'm not a monster. You hurt." One of the aliens, a younger one by the looks of it, made a sound that the translator rendered as something between a whimper and a question mark. "Yeah, that's what I thought," Bobby said. "Look, here's the deal. It's Christmas next week. I got family coming over. I got a turkey to cook. I got presents to wrap. I got approximately 17 different things I need to do before my mother-in-law shows up tomorrow and starts judging my life choices. So here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna get back in your fancy flying saucer. You're gonna leave, and you're gonna tell whoever sent you that Minnesota is closed for the season. We'll be happy to discuss your invasion come April, maybe May, after the thaw. But right now, we're busy." The alien stared at him, then at the overturned APC, then back at Bobby. Do you understand what you're saying? We're an empire. We've conquered 47 star systems. We have weapons that can they start my truck when it's -20 out? What? Can your weapons start my truck in -20-degree weather? Because that's my biggest problem right now. That, and the fact that my wife spent $300 on Christmas lights and half of them don't work. You invade us in July, fine. We'll throw you a proper fight. Hot dogs, fireworks, the whole thing. But December is off limits. More aliens were approaching, not to attack. To listen? Bobby turned to address the growing crowd. You all seem like reasonable beings, whatever you are. So I'm going to make you all an offer. One offer. You leave now, nobody has to get hurt worse than they already have. You get to go home. Tell your families about your exciting trip to Earth. Maybe bring back some souvenir t-shirts that say, I invaded Earth and all I got was hypothermia. Or, you can stick around and I promise you, you will learn exactly why humans invented something called a Molotov cocktail and why we're really, really good at improvising weapons from household items. The aliens looked at each other. One of them, braver than the rest, stepped forward. Our general will not allow retreat. Bobby sighed, pulled out his phone, hit speed dial. Hey, Janet? Yeah, it's Bobby. Listen, these aliens aren't getting the message. Can you bring the ice fishing auger? Yeah, the industrial one. Thanks. He looked back at the aliens. Last chance. The alien commander on the bridge of the inevitable consequence was having what humans would call a come-to-Jesus moment, except Crixnath didn't believe in Jesus, had never heard of Jesus, and would have been very confused by the metaphor. He did, however, understand that his invasion was falling apart faster than a soufflé in an earthquake. Casualties? He asked, his voice hollow. Thelix consulted his display, his face the color of old dishwater. 42% of ground forces disabled or captured, 8 dropships destroyed, 3 command units requesting immediate evacuation, and, sir, what? The humans have started coordinating. They've established what they're calling defensive perimeters around major population centers. They're using their telecommunications infrastructure to spread tactical information, and they're laughing about it, sir. They think this is funny. On the view screen, a human news broadcast was playing. A female human in professional attire sat behind a desk, speaking into a camera with what could only be described as barely suppressed amusement. Unprecedented events continue to unfold across Minnesota, where residents have taken it upon themselves to repel what appears to be an extraterrestrial invasion force. Local authorities are asking citizens to remain calm, though reports indicate the alien forces are the ones retreating. In a statement released just minutes ago, the governor announced that Minnesota is, quote, not accepting invasions at this time. Please check back in spring, end quote. The aliens could not be reached for comment. In other news, the potluck at First Lutheran has been postponed. Crixnath turned off the screen. We need to evacuate, now. Sir, if we don't retreat, we'll be destroyed by a population of civilians who are treating this like an inconvenience. Have you seen what they're doing down there? They're carpooling to battle. They're bringing casseroles. One human showed up to fight us with a weapon labeled Grandma's cast iron skillet, and it worked. It destroyed a plasma rifle. Sir, with respect, the Empire has never retreated from... The Empire has never invaded a planet full of creatures who consider winter a character-building experience. Crixnath was shouting now, all composure lost. Do you know what I just learned, Thelix? Do you? These humans, these Minnesota humans, they go outside for fun when it's this cold. They have a sport called ice fishing, where they sit in small structures on frozen lakes in negative temperatures and call it relaxing. They're insane, all of them. Sir, they walk around in short sleeves when it's 40 degrees out. 40! That's practically the melting point of frozen nitrogen. And they call it nice weather. Nice weather. A new alarm. It blared. Now what? Crixnath demanded. Sir, we're picking up a massive energy signature on the surface. Multiple signatures. They's moving toward our landing zones. What kind of weapons are they using? Thelix's hands trembled as he magnified the sensor display. Sir, they're not weapons. They're vehicles, civilian vehicles, hundreds of them, thousands. They're all converging on our positions. What could they possibly... He didn't finish the sentence because the view screen, which some idiot had turned back on, showed exactly what the humans were doing. They'd organized, through social media, phone calls, and what appeared to be pure Midwestern passive-aggressive determination, the population of not just Frostbite Falls, but 17 surrounding towns had mobilized. They were coming in pickup trucks, SUVs, minivans with family stickers on the back. One man was riding a snowplow. Another was on a four-wheeler. A group of teenagers had somehow weaponized their snowmobiles with what appeared to be bottle rockets duct-taped to the handlebars. It looked less like a military assault and more like the world's angriest Christmas parade. And they were all converging on the largest alien landing site where Crixnath had foolishly decided to establish his command center in a converted ice fishing supply store in Frostbite Falls. "Get me out of here," Crixnath whispered. "Get me out of here now. Sir, we can't just abandon the ground forces. Watch me!" But it was too late for a clean extraction. The humans had surrounded the landing site, not with military precision, not with tactical formation. They'd just arrived, parked their vehicles in a rough circle, got out, stood there with their arms crossed, waiting. One human, an elderly woman in a parka that looked older than most of the aliens' careers, walked up to the perimeter shield and knocked on it. She actually knocked like it was a door. "Hello?" Her voice came through the translator. "You folks planning on leaving anytime soon? Only I got a hair appointment at 3 and I'd rather not reschedule." A younger human joined her. Male, approximately 30 years old, holding a child's hand. "Yeah, and my kid's got a Christmas pageant tonight. She's an angel. We've been practicing for weeks, so if you could maybe wrap up your whole invasion thing." More humans gathered. Not threatening, not aggressive, just there, standing, looking mildly annoyed, like the aliens were a package delivered to the wrong address. It was, Crixnath thought distantly, the most terrifying thing he'd ever experienced. "Commander Thelix," he said quietly. "Remember how I said we'd conquered 47 star systems?" "Yes, sir. I would like to amend that statement. We've conquered 47 star systems full of reasonable beings who understood proper military etiquette. These humans don't follow any of the rules." Sir, rules of engagement are pretty universal." "They hit us with frozen fish, Thelix. Fish! One of our drop teams was incapacitated by what their military is calling, and I quote, aggressive potluck attendance. A civilian brought cookies to the battlefield, homemade cookies, offered them to our troops. 3 soldiers ate them before I could order them to stop. They're in medical now with what the humans call sugar coma. Sir, perhaps if we just explained our intentions. Our intentions? Our intentions were to conquer them. How do you politely explain conquest?" On the surface, Bobby Thorskold had been elected through a democratic process that took approximately 4 minutes and involved a lot of pointing as the spokesperson for the human resistance. He didn't want the job. He just wanted to protect his snowmobile. But here he was, standing in front of what his phone's translator app called an Imperial Command vessel, trying to figure out how to get these idiots to leave. "You got someone in charge in there?" he called out. A speaker crackled to life. "This is General Crixnath Velmoranth of the Collective Primordial Empire. You will cease your resistance immediately, or face the full might of—" Yeah, heard it already. "Look, Cricknack, you got a nickname or something? That's a mouthful." Silence. Then, You want me to give you a nickname? Would make this easier. How about Keith? You look like a Keith. I am a general of an empire that spans 17 galaxies. And I'm a guy whose snowmobile is currently underneath your spaceship. So either you're Keith or you're that jerk who crushed Bobby's snowmobile. Your choice." More silence. Longer this time. Then in a voice that sounded like someone having all their dreams crushed simultaneously, "Keith is acceptable." "Great. Okay, Keith. Here's the situation. It's December 24th. That's Christmas Eve for those of us who celebrate. Tomorrow's Christmas. Day after that, we got leftover management, returns, and the general recovery period. Day after that is the week nobody knows what day it is. Then we got New Year's, then we got the January depression period. Point is, we're busy. Real busy. So unless you want to stick around until March, which I do not recommend because March in Minnesota is worse than December, I suggest you pack up your toys and head on home. We came here to conquer your world. Right, but see, that's going to be a problem because we're not real interested in being conquered right now. Maybe in summer. You guys have summer where you're from? Of course we have. That's not the point. Well, it's my point. You come back in July, we'll give you a proper welcome. Brats, beers, maybe some volleyball. But right now it's the holidays, Keith. Family time. You got family? The question seemed to catch Crixnath off guard. Yes, I have a broodmate and 3 offspring. There you go. Don't you want to see them? Maybe bring them back some souvenirs? We got some lovely gift shops in Duluth. Beautiful lakefront. Cold as hell this time of year, but the views are nice. I can't just leave. The Empire expects... Keith, buddy, pal, let me explain something to you. Bobby's voice lost some of its folksy charm. Not threatening, just honest. You rolled up into Minnesota in December. You crushed my snowmobile. You interrupted Christmas preparations. You scared my wife, annoyed my neighbors, and generally made a nuisance of yourselves. Now we're patient people, polite people. But we're also people who have survived this winter so far, which means we've dealt with frozen pipes, dead batteries, black ice, and the general crushing darkness of seasonal depression. We are hanging on by a thread, Keith, a very thin, very frayed thread, and you just came along and tugged on it. Bobby gestured to the assembled crowd. You see all these folks? These are people who've been dealing with winter since October, who've scraped frost off their windshields in the dark, who've shoveled driveways in negative temperatures, who've spent their hard-earned money on gifts for relatives they barely like. They're exhausted, Keith. Physically, mentally, emotionally. And you know what exhausted people don't want? More problems. He paused. Let that sink in. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to power up your ships, you're going to leave, and you're going to tell whatever boss you got that Earth, specifically Minnesota, specifically in winter, is off the menu. Forever. We'll register it with whoever keeps track of these things, put up a sign, closed for season, whatever it takes. Because if you don't leave, if you decide to stick around and make this difficult, then these people, these tired, cold, fed-up people, are going to stop being polite. And Keith, you don't want that. Trust me. Inside the command vessel, Crixnath looked at Thelix. Thelix looked at the sensor displays showing thousands of humans just standing there, waiting, patient as glaciers and twice as inevitable. Sir, Thelix said softly, he's right. We should leave. If we leave, the Empire will... Sir, if we stay, we'll be obliterated by farmers with improvised weapons. At least if we retreat, we're alive to face the tribunal. Crixnath closed his eyes. In his long military career, he'd made thousands of decisions. Some good, some bad, some catastrophically stupid. But this was simple. Begin evacuation procedures, he ordered. All units. Full retreat. What about the equipment we'll be leaving behind? Leave it. The humans can keep it as compensation for the snowmobile. 20 minutes later, the skies above Frostbite Falls filled with ascending spacecraft. The aliens departed with the speed of people who just realized they'd accidentally walked into the wrong house during a family argument. Bobby stood in his driveway, watching them go. Martha came out with fresh coffee. They leaving? She asked. Yep. Good. Turkey's not gonna cook itself. Merry Christmas, Martha. Merry Christmas, Bobby. On Lumethria, in the council chamber, the sages watched the retreat with expressions ranging from relief to grim satisfaction. Well, High Sage Law Maven said, that was faster than I expected. 2 hours and 37 minutes, Primax confirmed. New record. Did we get all the documentation we needed? Every second, sir. Full sensor coverage, combat analysis, psychological profiles. We've even got footage of that woman hitting an alien with her purse. It's magnificent. Lawmaven nodded slowly. Good. Prepare a revised edition of Regulation 23,847-2022. I want video attachments, audio recordings, detailed threat analysis, and Primax. Yes, sir. Double the exclamation marks. Make it 34. Sir, that seems 34. Nobody is going to make this mistake again. Not on my watch. Sage Quinnereth leaned back in their chair. Do you think they learned their lesson? The collective? Maybe. Probably not. Military leaders have short memories when it comes to humiliation. Lawmaven pulled up a star chart. But we'll make sure every other species learns. I'm authorizing a galactic broadcast. Full transparency. Everyone gets to see what happens when you invade humanity in winter. Won't that be embarrassing for the collective? Good. Embarrassment prevents future stupidity. Usually. He paused. Did we ever get a casualty count? Tirnethia consulted her datapad. 47% of the collective ground forces injured or incapacitated. 0 human casualties. 3 humans reported feeling a bit chilly, but refused medical attention. 1 human complained about missing the opening of a sporting event. That's it. They repelled a galactic empire without a single casualty. In under 3 hours. In December, during Christmas preparations. The sages sat in silence, absorbing this information. Finally, Prelenth spoke. You know what the truly terrifying part is? They weren't even trying. Not really. They were just annoyed. Annoyed, Lawmaven repeated. They defeated a military invasion force because they were annoyed. Interrupted during the holidays, Quinnereth added. Never interrupt a human's holidays, or their sports, or damage their property. Especially don't damage their recreational vehicles. The snowmobile thing really set them off. Lawmaven made a decision. New regulation, separate from 23,147,292. Regulation 23,147,293. Do not, under any circumstances, damage human property, particularly vehicles they use for recreation and take unreasonable pride in. Thoughts? Make it 30 exclamation marks. Tirnethia suggested. Match the winter regulation. Done. 6 months later, Crixnath sat in a small apartment on a backwater station in the Outer Rim. He'd been discharged from the military, not dishonorably, just discharged. The Empire had quietly erased all records of the Minnesota incident as it was now known. His military awards sat in a box in his closet. His uniform hung in the back of his wardrobe, unworn. He worked now as a logistics coordinator for a shipping company. It was boring, safe. Nobody tried to hit him with frozen fish. His communicator chimed. A message from Thelix, who'd also been discharged and now ran a small restaurant on the other side of the galaxy. Saw the news today. Some idiot species is planning to invade Earth. Their military advisor didn't read the regulations. Should we warn them? Crixnath thought about it. Thought about Minnesota, about Bobby Thorskold and his snowmobile, about humans who treated an alien invasion like a minor inconvenience, about elderly women with dangerous purses and the sound of snowmobiles being weaponized. He typed back, "No, let them learn." He poured himself a drink, looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, approximately 8,000 light-years away, was a small blue planet full of creatures who'd beaten him with farming equipment and improvised weapons. He raised his glass in salute. "Merry Christmas, Bobby Thorskold," he said quietly. "You magnificent, terrifying, incomprehensible human." On Earth in Frostbite Falls, Minnesota, Bobby Thorskold was in his garage, working on his new snowmobile. Insurance had paid out for the old one. The new one was bigger, faster, had a cup holder. Martha appeared in the doorway. "Bobby, you watching the news?" "Why?" "Aliens tried to invade again. Russia this time. February." Bobby looked up. "How'd that go for them?" "Not well. Russians threw them out in 45 minutes. Use something called a banya as a strategic weapon. News is saying it's even faster than our time. Well, Bobby said, returning to his work. Good for them. Think they'll try again? Bobby tightened a bolt, tested the engine, smiled. Eventually, they always do, but I figure they'll learn the same lesson everyone else does. What's that? Don't mess with humans in winter. We've got enough problems already. Martha laughed, headed back inside. Bobby worked on his snowmobile, humming a Christmas carol despite it being June. Above him, somewhere in the vast darkness of space, an updated version of the Galactic Concordance Manual was being distributed to every species in known civilization. Regulation 23,847-292 now included video footage, detailed analysis, and a specific subsection titled The Minnesota Incident, a Cautionary Tale. It featured 34 exclamation marks, a highlighted section about snowmobiles, and a photograph of Bobby Thorskold, coffee mug in hand, staring down an alien invasion force with nothing more than irritation and the determination of a man who'd had enough. The caption read simply, "This is a human in winter. Proceed accordingly." Across the galaxy, military academies added the Minnesota incident to their curriculum, not as a lesson in tactics, not as a study in military failure, but as a fundamental truth about the universe. Some species evolved for strength, some for intelligence, some for endurance, and some, a very specific some, evolved to survive winter in Minnesota, which made them, quite possibly, the most dangerous creatures in existence, not because they were violent by nature, not because they sought conflict, but because they'd been forged in an environment so hostile, so relentlessly brutal, that an alien invasion barely registered as a significant threat. It was just another problem, another thing to deal with, another inconvenience on a long list of inconveniences that included frozen pipes, dead batteries, and in-laws who criticized your holiday cooking. The sages had been right all along. The rule about winter wasn't about human military capability. It wasn't about weapons or tactics or strategic advantage. It was about something much simpler and infinitely more dangerous. People who'd reached their limit. And in winter, in the dark, cold months when the sun barely rose and the temperature dropped below the threshold of reasonable existence, humans in places like Minnesota reached their limit approximately 3 times a week. The aliens had picked the wrong week, the wrong month, the wrong season, the wrong planet, and most critically, they'd crushed the wrong snowmobile. Some mistakes are small, some are large, some are existential, and some involve General Crixnath Velmoranth deciding to invade Minnesota in December without reading the manual. History would remember him for many things: his victories, his strategies, his 47 conquered systems. But it would remember him most for learning, the hard way, what 47 million regulations had tried to tell him.